Joined now by the great Nick Torre of Gators Online. Nick did not rest on Super Bowl Sunday. He was not sitting around watching the game. He was breaking a story about Florida's strength coach, Craig Fitzgerald, recently hired, 5 weeks on the job, leaving to become the Boston College strength coach.
It's a tough headline. If you click the link, which I hope you did, and our bosses,
a lot of your message boarders did not, because they were jumping to conclusions before reading the story.
Yeah. If you click the link, it makes a lot of sense, and it's kind of why I said before Mark Hockey was reassigned, I didn't think Billy Napier would reassign or fire Mark Hockey. Strength coaches and head coaches are locked together. I truly believe if Urban Meyer came back and coached the New Mexico State Lobos, that Mickey Marotti would leave Ohio State and go coach with Urban Meyer at New Mexico State. Like, that's what head coaches and strength coaches do. They're an integral to the head coach. Bill O'Brien and Fitz met in Maryland. When Bill O'Brien got the head coaching job at Penn State, he plucked Fitz and brought him with him. When he left to go to Houston, he took Fitz, brought him with him. So when Bill O'Brien goes to Boston College, the very first call he's going to make is going to be to Craig Fitzgerald. Unfortunately for Florida, Craig was only on the job 5 weeks. And unfortunately for Florida, Bill O'Brien wasn't at Alabama. And the headline now reads Boston College.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Bill O'Brien getting a head coaching job was not something even Bill O'Brien thought was going to happen 5 weeks ago. And I think that changes the dynamics of everything. But it doesn't sting any less if you're Florida and you're Billy Napier and you're going into what feels like a make or break season, and you thought you had a really good, accomplished strength coach, which is what Craig Fitzgerald is, and now you've got to figure it out on the fly. So what are they doing for now?
Yeah, so right now, Florida starts their identity phase, which is, as Billy Napier called it, the most mentally and physically grueling portion of their offseason. So you have Mark Hockey still on campus in a role. He knows what's going on. But from what I've been told, it's going to be Tyler Miles, who's the director of player athletic development. He joined the team last year. He was a guy that the players even lobbied for to get the job before Craig Fitzgerald was hired. And he will lead the team through this second phase of the offseason, what Billy Napier likes to call the identity phase. And it remains to be seen. Does Florida just stick with the guys they have? Do they go and find somebody else? That relationship dynamic of strength coaches and head coaches still remains. And now you're less than a month away from spring football for a lot of these programs who, and as angry as Florida fans were at Craig Fitzgerald for leaving when he did, it's going to be probably hard for Billy to find another guy to poach who is qualified or worthy to be Florida's strength coach.
I was gonna say they're not. I can't think of a lot of free agents out there right now, or guys that are in flux because of the NFL. So it is a really tough time to have to hire somebody, and it sounds like they've got somebody who knows the players like. So that does make sense why you would just go there and then kind of ride it out. But for Billy Napier, it seems like yet another hit. And I haven't got a chance to talk to you on the show since this happened. So Billy Napier, he had a press conference last week on signing day. You guys asked him a bunch of questions. He had a very interesting interview, I thought, with Sean Kelly, who was the voice of the Gators, on Sean Kelly's podcast, where Sean asked some pretty pointed questions, which you're not expecting from the announcer. But like, one of the questions he asked him was, "Please help me explain to the fans when I get asked why there isn't an on-field special teams coordinator." And Billy answered that with basically, there are other really good programs that do it this way, and so this is the way I've decided to do it. And then the other question was,
if I could interject, what Billy can't say is, Sean, the NCAA is not sending people to watch to make sure analysts aren't coaching on the sidelines, and when they start doing that around the country, we'll probably get an on-field guy. But until then, we feel good with an analyst there.
Well, and I think what's going to happen more than likely is the coaches will threaten a class action lawsuit. the limits on the number of coaches will go away, and then you can just have an on-field special teams coordinator along with whatever else you want to have. So that's probably the more likely outcome. The question is, how long that is till that happens. But the other question, obviously, that you guys asked multiple times and that Billy answered in that interview, the in-house interview, with an answer that I think, even though he didn't answer it directly, I think we know what he means. Yeah. It was, are you calling the plays this year? Mm-hmm. And I got the sense, yep. And he thinks the defense was more the issue last year. Offense is actually doing what it needs to do.
Well, if you take Billy Napier, and I'm learning, as you cover somebody on the beat and you interact with them a lot, you kind of learn them. I take Billy Napier at his word. I think he's an honest man. So when he says we take stock and we do rigorous evaluations of our staff and of each other, of ourselves after every year, I know that Billy Napier, who has been a head coach now 6 years, had never fired an assistant football coach. So when they took stock after 2023, shortly after the season, 2 defensive coaches were fired. The first coaches Billy Napier has fired as a head coach. Nobody on offense has made or has been moved or changed. So that tells me Billy Napier thinks the problem was on defense. The problem was that we weren't strong enough, got a new strength coach. The problem was, hey, we had some procedural issues on special teams that kept creeping up, got another guy for special teams. Clearly, the offense isn't the issue. And then I keep going back to the point. If Billy Napier believes his job is not on the line in 2024, then why make a change on offense? Furthermore, if he thinks his job is on the line, why would I give up play calling and let other play caller determine my fate and my future?
That's it right there. And that's what, as people have asked me about this, that's the explanation that makes the most sense. Is if you feel like you are in a hot seat situation, your job's on the line, why would you not do the thing that you've done your entire career? Why would you change and put it in the hands of somebody else instead of yourself, who you probably trust the most? And the other part of that, because there are situations where you might feel like, now Ryan Day's not on the hot seat, but clearly he feels very comfortable handing play calling to Chip Kelly, who taught him how to call plays.
Right.
The situation with Billy Napier is a little bit different, where if you are going to hire an offensive coordinator from the outside, that person is going to demand a surcharge because you're in danger of getting fired. Mm-hmm. They're going to demand at least 3 years on a contract. So if you're Billy Napier, or if you're the administration at Florida, that doesn't seem too appealing to you either. Mm-hmm. Because one, the best of the best aren't coming because they're worried they're going to get fired. And two, so now you're into the middle of the pack and they're going to demand more money.
Mm-hmm. And I think you could have gotten somebody, depending on what the contract would have been, but maybe a young up and comer. I know, Willie Corn's name was thrown out, and Marion's name running through the rumor mill. But then you're asking, well, are you also making wholesale changes in year 3?
Right.
Or are you
those two offenses, to run by the way, stuff? Nothing different. Like Billy Napier's offense.
Way different. It was kind of like Will Muschamp, who I think was saddled with Charlie Weiss because they wanted somebody with head coaching experience. And then you make a move to Brent Pease. And then it's like, hey, man, no one's running this pro style thing. You've got to figure out how to do the spread. But you'd already spent 4 years recruiting guys to run your pro style offense. Now, Kurt Roper gets here and goes, why are there 350-pound offensive linemen? We need 280, 260-pound offensive linemen. We need to spread out and run it around. And it was just, you're throwing one tiny, duck floaty to a passenger on the Titanic. It just wasn't going to happen.
Yeah, one of the great unanswered what ifs in Florida football history is, what if Will Muschamp had arrived with a more modern offensive philosophy and a different offensive coordinator? Because I think that tenure would have gone very differently had that happened. But it's now we are sitting here. I'm counting three coaches on from Will Muschamp. We're
soon to be on a full hand, working on a second hand.
Yes.
Now, Andy, there is another scenario I think that could happen. Maybe Billy, I know that Russ Callaway got more responsibilities as last year went on. Maybe Billy wants to see how Russ does in the spring. Hey, when we go to team periods during the first 2 weeks, we're going to let Russ call plays during our team periods. He'll diagram those. When we go to our first scrimmage of spring, Russ is going to call offense ones versus ones. I'll call them twos versus twos and see how he does. If Billy Napier sat up there on Wednesday of National Signing Day and told us, yeah, I'm giving the play calling to Russ Callaway, and then you went through spring and it just didn't look right, now you have to fire him. You can't then take away play calling. So I don't know if I'm going to close the door and Billy Napier won't let Russ Callaway call plays, or maybe even kind of a Brian Johnson, Dan Mullen situation where as much as I've said about Dan Mullen helped Brian Johnson get his job in the NFL. A quarterback, Dan Mullen's quarterback coach was not getting a job in the NFL. Dan Mullen's offensive coordinator for a good offense would. And that could be something that Billy would want to do with Russ Callaway. But if you say it on Wednesday, there's no putting that toothpaste back in the tube if you get through 15 spring practices and it doesn't look or feel right.
Well, and it's interesting because I've seen the discourse around the play calling, and I'm with you in terms of Billy deciding he wants to keep calling the plays because this is do or die right now. But in terms of whether it was the defense definitely needed to be improved.
Yeah.
But let's talk about the numbers for the offense. They were number 47 in yards per play in the country. So kind of middle of the pack, 6 yards per play base, 6.05. And number 59 in scoring with 28.4 points. Because that's what it felt like when people were arguing, oh no, the offense is fine. They were cherry picking games. Yeah. And you can't cherry pick games. Like they all matter and they all count. Just because you're at Florida, Georgia's on your schedule. You got to find a way to score on them. So
it took me about 2 weeks, but going through when Billy Napier was first hired, going through and watching Louisiana film, watching their games, highlights, full games. I told Florida fans, I don't think you're going to like this offense. They could be very, very good. The team could have very good records. This isn't going to excite you. And when I look at Michigan, I think Billy Napier would watch Michigan in the national championship or in the playoff and go, that's our offense. That's what we are. We just don't have the guys yet. And watching that game with the people on our message board, that's not ever going to excite Florida fans, especially Florida fans my age.
I think winning will excite them. And the way Michigan ran it, it was an explosive offense when it needed to be. And they could just maul you up front. But there's no
excuse. Wait 9 years to get to that.
Yeah, there's no excuse. You can't in the transfer portal era say, I don't have my guys. It's your fault you don't have your guys. Very true. That's the problem that they run into. That doesn't become an excuse anymore. You can't say, well, this is a 5-year process. No, not when we just watched Kalen DeBoer get Washington in the national title game in year 2. That doesn't work in this era. I think now's a good time to talk about our friends at FanDuel. So go to FanDuel.com/Staples, get signed up. If you win a $5 bet, you get $150 in bonus bets. And this is the time to do it if you want to put in a little on your team's win total for the 2024 season. FanDuel dropped a ton of win totals on us last week. And so Ole Miss, for example, 9.5 wins. There's quite a few 9.5 win teams out there. Miami, 9.5 wins. So big expectations there from the folks at FanDuel. And I am very interested to see how all of this comes together. We're going to talk to Nick Torre from Gators Online in a few minutes about Florida's win total. It's 5.5. That's the same as last year, but the schedule's harder than last year. So, Florida finished 5-7 last year. So they were right on it. And so head to FanDuel, download that app, FanDuel.com/Staples, get yourself signed up. So let's talk about it. We're going through some win totals this week, Nick. FanDuel, our friends, dropped a bunch of them on us. So all the power conferences, the core 4, we got the win totals for them. And Florida's is at 5.5. And as weird as that sounds, that makes me think Vegas thinks Florida's better than last year because Florida's schedule is harder, but this is the same win total as last year.
Yeah, I think this might be the best roster Florida has in terms of talent and depth of talent. But yeah, the schedule, I said it last year and it rings true again. Catch wins early because you're going to catch hands late. Like Georgia at Texas, you haven't beat LSU in I think 3 or 4 years. Ole Miss just spent a bunch of money to try to take their run at it this year. At Tennessee, Florida lost the last time they were up there. And that first game, I think that you might as well call Florida versus Miami like the Pink Slip Bowl because
It's the referendum bowl. Yeah.
Whatever fan base loses that game will light the pitchforks and run to their head coach's house. That Florida Miami game, to me, those two coaches were hired the same year, have kind of had the same middling to less than to worse than middling.
Right. They're getting some highly touted high school prospects. Like the roster looks like it is gradually improving in both cases, but the on-field results have not been satisfactory. And you're exactly right.
If you're only selling recruiting, you're selling hope. And if you lose that game as Billy or Mario, good luck selling hope the next 11, 12 weeks.
Yeah, because I think the Miami fan base and the Florida fan base will go into that game going, well, if we can't beat them, who can we beat?
Right.
And that's where now, but let's put that schedule back up again because this is a fascinating schedule. First, well, before we even go any further, you've got Samford, which dropped a 50 burger on Florida in Dan Mullen's penultimate game as head coach. And I just wanted to say penultimate there. But Samford did score 50 last time in the Swamp. But then the Texas A&M game in Gainesville is a fascinating one, too, because we have no idea what that roster is going to look like with Mike Elko coaching it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, same thing with Mississippi State, new staff there.
Jeff Levy.
UCF gets a quarterback who just beat Florida in the Swamp last year with a coach who won't have KJ Jefferson throwing the ball 40 times. KJ Jefferson will run the ball 25 times with Gus Malzahn, and that's going to be a handful.
Actually, Nick, I'm going to stop you while you're talking about UCF. And we'll delve into this one further because I feel like it deserves its own segment at some point. What do you think UCF's win total is on FanDuel?
6.5.
8.5.
8.5. Oh no. Oh no.
I called that up and I was like, I'm looking at my phone like, no, that can't be right.
That might be including one of the Florida ones. But look at that. The UCF Gus, the powers of the Big 12. Early on.
That's right.
If I look at it and I try to be objective, I think Miami is better on the lines. I think Florida has a better quarterback. And who knows what Cam Ward will be with that offense. You should be.
We know Graham Mertz is going to be pretty good. I think Graham Mertz surprised some people last year.
True. I look at that and you should beat Miami. You should beat Samford. You should beat Texas A&M. Florida has been an absolute disaster away from the Swamp, but I think you should beat a brand new Mississippi State coaching staff with that roster. You should beat UCF at home. We're 5-0 heading to Knoxville here, where you lost the last time you went, and you haven't beat Kentucky since I don't even know. Kentucky's starting their own.
Here's the thing, Nick. This schedule is so nasty. Even in that best case scenario of starting 5-0, you can still not wind up bowl eligible.
That's what happened to Florida last year. Florida hit their 5-win total, I think, before Georgia, and then could not get one more win to get the over last year when their over-under was 5.5. You could theoretically get to 5-0 and be feeling really good about that future over-under that you placed in February. And there's absolutely a road to 5-7, despite a 5-0 start.
It is like when you see it up there, that last 5 games, just because it's one thing to say it's a hard schedule, but to look at it, like you've got Georgia and Jacksonville, you have to go to Austin, LSU comes to Gainesville, Ole Miss comes to Gainesville, you go to Tallahassee. Like that is brutal. That is absolutely brutal.
And what will Florida State be? They lost a ton. Ole Miss reloaded. good luck in Austin. I'll be excited to be there. I've never been to the 40 acres. We'll be leaning on you for some recommendations for food while we're out there.
So many places.
But you're not going to beat Georgia. I don't see beating Texas. I think Lane Kiffin comes into the stadium he probably wishes he was coaching at, if we're talking, 5 years back. And puts up a bunch of points as long as they're healthy. You say well as in Lane Kiffin comes in for a job interview there in November. But it's a really, really tough schedule. And I don't know, the biggest area for me, when I look at Florida under Billy Napier, I don't know that the offensive line's ever been good. I think Osiris Torrance, who was a unanimous All-American, and then the 6'5" created player you had at quarterback made the offensive line look really good. And once you took just those pieces away, the line was very average last year. And Zach and I kind of went back and forth on this on our Gators Online podcast. He was saying the recruiting class was really good. And I said, that's nice, but none of those freshmen are going to help you. And you really only got one starter who's a kid who played in the Pac-12 last year, or Mountain West.
That's the hard part with the offensive line is you can have a great recruiting class and it doesn't. Well, and that's where Miami's interesting this year, because in year 2 of a recruit, when you had a pretty good offensive line recruiting class, then you really start to see some stuff. Texas is a great example of that from last year. Texas was 2 years out from having a great recruiting class, and that line was very good. And I would expect it to be even better this year. So that's the thing. And if you're Billy Napier, you got to hang on to try to get to that point. And so we'll see. But before I let you go, I do want to ask you a question or two that might make Florida fans actually smile. Well, they haven't gotten to do that much lately. But Todd Golden's basketball Gators looking like a team that is very much in the NCAA tournament after beating Auburn.
Yeah, I mean, especially the way Auburn came in and just blasted Bama. You come in, and I think they were favorites, on last Saturday, and Florida used that bye to their advantage. The Gators play really, really well at home, and I think you just got to figure out a way to kind of steal a couple road games. They'll get LSU at home. That's a winnable game. And I think when you look at Florida's schedule at Georgia, it's always interesting when you play Mike White. At Alabama will be tough. Luckily, you get Vanderbilt at home. That's a tough place to shoot at. But you look at the rest of the schedule and you think, hey, this team could rally or rip off a couple more wins. And Florida, who's been flirting with the bubble and the last 4 in, the first 4 out, seem to have kind of gotten over that hump. And if you're listening to this and you're a Gator fan, find some wood. Don't blame me if I jinxed it by saying that.
Riley Kugel, whose dad is like the most jacked man in the universe, 22 points against Auburn. But I like the way that Golden put this roster together. And look, basketball is a different animal. Football's becoming like this, where you've got to really kind of build your roster every single year. But basketball's been like that for a couple of years. And Golden, this particular year, seems to have put the pieces together pretty well.
Portal God Todd is what we call him at Gators Online. He has no problem going in there. I mean, when you look at their roster, they're full with him. Walter Clayton Jr. leading the team in scoring. Zion Pullen, Tyrese Samuel, Will Richard. A lot of really, really good additions through the portal. And I think it'll be interesting because it's a little bit of an older team based on that. And when you look at teams that get to the dance and teams that do well, it's typically older teams or teams with, really elite point guard play. And I think Florida is that older team, and they've got some guys who, when they're shooting it well, I mean, Zion Pullen's been fantastic, and Walter Clayton Jr. Not as quite as unconscious as Kenny Boynton, but not afraid to pull up from anywhere on the court and rip it through.
Kenny Boynton had no regard for humanity, and that didn't always work out very well for him. But Walter Clayton, big headband guy, like the headbands. So, Nick, I'm glad we gave him something to be cheerful about.
Hey, and Kevin O'Sullivan signed through 2033. So you got baseball too.
And they probably got the number 1 pick in the baseball draft this year.
Yeah, there you go. There's positives.
That's right. Nick Del Torre's not always negative. I read you on the message boards. I see what you're saying about Nick. Nick, thank you so much.
Thanks, Andy.
Thank you so much for watching. Just a reminder Subscribe to this channel right here so you never miss an episode of Andy Staples on 3. And oh, by the way, watch all the other great videos on the On3 Sports YouTube channel.